Hello, it's me, Mr. Guy. So, we launched the Intravenous 1 remaster. Surprisingly, everybody loves it, or at least I haven't heard from people that don't like it yet. And there was one thing I knew was going to happen, and I knew that some people would not like the new music that's in the remaster. And by new music, I mean the VIP versions of tracks. VIP in this instance means variation in production, which is a term used by producers, and it means that the track is like updated and remixed, remastered by the same person who made the original. But I knew that some people would not like the VIP tracks in the remaster, and I was even considering adding like a toggle switch which would allow the player to choose between like all original music only or the remaster music only. But I didn't have the time for that, so I ended up just skipping over that. But I wanted to talk about this because I've also been in that camp before with Payday 2. With Payday 2, when it was just released and was in beta, I don't remember the specifics. It had a couple of tracks that I really liked, and then in one of the updates, they just completely redid them. As in, the composer is Simon Wiklund, or Simon Wiklund, I don't know how to properly pronounce his name. He basically did an iteration on the music, and it sounded different for me to dislike it. I was like, man, what the hell is this? The original was better. Ah. And so 10 years go by, and it was either this year or last year or 2023, I don't remember. I listened to the original tracks, the ones that the updated versions of I didn't like, and I was listening to the original and I was like, what the hell? How could I like this, Then I listened to the updated tracks and I found them to be just outright better. And so what you need to understand is when somebody makes a variation of their own music, if it happens years later, you have to understand that composers are people too. They're not machines that go click clack, music done, They are people too. They have their own understanding of what makes good music, what makes bad music, and so on and so forth. And as the years go by, they also get better at composing, and their taste in music changes, and so many more things. Even something like the mental state of the composer at the time influences how his music is going to sound. I will not divulge any private info, but let's just say that when Extroller was making the soundtrack for Intravenous 1, things weren't going all too well for him. And so that's why the music in part sounds the way it does. And then, fast forward all these years to 2025, he's in a much better place in life now than he was back then. Just by that alone, just by the fact that he is in a different state emotionally, that immediately has an effect on how his work is going to sound. Whether you like it or not, what's going on here will be immediately reflected on your work. And then the next important thing is that for the soundtrack of Intravenous 1, I asked him to make it sound like psytrance. However, for the soundtrack of Intravenous 2, we went for a more metal rock industrial with electronics mixed in. And so if he had simply made the VIP tracks like psytrance again, there would be a clash in the style of music that you hear in the game, because some of the tracks in Intravenous 2 are VIPs of the soundtrack from the first game, namely the missions where you play as Steve. Those missions, all of them except for one, use VIP versions of tracks from Intravenous 1. And so if you were to play through the remaster and then suddenly it's like psytrance, you get to the next level, it plays the VIP track from a mission that was used in Intravenous 2, and it's like industrial, and then you play the next level, it's psytrance again, then the next mission is psytrance, and then it's industrial. That would sound terrible. It would sound inconsistent. So when you're making a game, one important factor is consistency. If things are consistent, it doesn't make you raise an eyebrow. And I believe the only reason why people find the tracks to sound worse in their opinion, they know what the originals sound like. If they had not heard the originals and they listened to the remaster versions first and then to the originals, I would bet that most people would pick the remaster tracks over the originals, because objectively speaking, even to my ear that has, gotten so used to the sound of the soundtrack from the first game, because, I spent several thousands of hours making the game and listening to the same music again and again, The remaster tracks just sound better. They're more complex, they're better composed, all these things. I'm not a composer, I don't know all the terms, I'm not gonna pretend I know all them, but to me the remaster tracks sound way better. They have more energy to them, but I will concede one thing is that they lost some of the like atmosphere that they had. And that, I believe, is because Tuka, Extruller, the composer, is in a much better position now than he was 4 years ago when he made the soundtrack for the first game. Again, how a person feels immediately is reflected on their work. Now, with that said, if you don't like the music in the remaster, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not going to argue taste because, that's besides the point. But ultimately, I believe that the music in the remaster is better than it is in the original. Initially, there were some mixing issues that I told Tuka about, and he fixed those. As the DLC was being made, for example, the Assert and Conviction tracks sounded very weak. They just didn't have the punch that you would expect from the originals. And so that needed to be fixed, and we fixed it. And now I prefer the Assert and Conviction VIP versions over the originals. I tried to keep this short, but as always, I end up talking too much. So thanks for watching. See you next time.